want to know which planet was causing your suffering? How about Earth?
Hey everyone, Brandflex here, back with a new Duelists of Eden video. For today's video, I want to talk about 4 things that experienced players and testers will do a lot that you guys might not be doing in your gameplay. I think they're fairly obvious once you know they exist, but just in case that you don't know what they are, I just want to put it out there because they are very important concepts that will really help you out as you learn this game. So the gameplay in the background is going to be from the recent Thug Finals from the PMAG weekly tournament where Purpile won. Thug Finals are just the term we use for when a bunch of people, whether it's spectators or tournament players, they just come out of the woodworks and fight the tournament winner to see if they can take a game off of them. So that's what's happening in the background. It's going to be Windfall, who is playing right now under the name Dark Diamond 2222, and then Hua Yuan, who is Garden, later on in the video. And there is a part where I play, but I cut out the video just because it's an extra 10 minutes and the video doesn't need to be that long, so I'll probably use that footage for another video later. But anyways, with all said and done, go into the video right now. So the very first tip that I want to offer that might be obvious to experienced fighting game players, but might not be obvious to people who have Duelists as their first game, is understanding the importance of combos. And so what I mean by combos is knowing how your spells can string together to guarantee damage from each spell. So for example, the easiest combo in my head is going to be Align into Ragnarok. A slightly more advanced combo is going to be step slash auto slash push slash. And then even more advanced combos are going to be things that are like step slash kinetic wave, triple barrel, Ragnarok, right? And so the reason why knowing combos is very important is because if you know how your deck combos, you have access to way more damage per interaction, and that really cuts down on game time because if you do more damage per interaction, that means you have to interact less, and that means you can make more mistakes, or you can be a bit messier in your gameplay because as long as you kill your opponent before they kill you, assuming you do more damage per interaction, you'll win even if you quote-unquote make more mistakes, because in the end, the game is about defeating your opponent, right? It's not about how many mistakes you make compared to them. If you kill them before they kill you, you can make twice as many mistakes as them. If their deck does less damage and your deck does more, then you'll just win. And so stuff like whenever you build a deck, if you take decks that you know, a better player has built, you're making a deck yourself, you always want to make sure if there are ways to combo your cards together, and if there aren't ways to combo your cards together, then you have to make sure that your deck just has enough coverage to where it doesn't matter, and you'll have to have really strong defense to make sure you actually win games. So hopefully in the background you can see how Purpile and Windfall are comboing cards, because you can see that Purpile is utilizing Kinetic Wave into a bunch of back row spells. She's using stuff like Tax Return and Gravitas to combo into melee spells. She's going for Gravitas into, or using Guillotine into Gravitas, which lets her walk back and use Ragnarok. There's a lot of combos going on with her gameplay that make the game end really quickly because her spells cost so much and do a lot of damage. So she manages to hit one spell into another spell instead of just doing, 18 damage with Bow Snipe and Gravitas. If she has the combo prepped up correctly, she can do Bow Snipe, she can do Gravitas Bow Snipe into Light or into Thunder if she notices, and that's going to add another 7 damage. So instead of doing only 18 damage, now suddenly she's doing 25 damage, which is a 50% increase to her combo, which means that she needs to do that much less damage to kill you. And again, this might be very obvious to fighting game players, but for me, as a person with Duelists as their first fighting game ever, it took me a while to understand that concept. So I guess the TLDR of this tip is that if you have a deck, just learn the combo strings, and once you learn the combo strings and implement it into your gameplay, you'll notice that your games get much, much easier because you'll actually defeat your opponent a bit easier. And so building off of that tip, tip number 2 is going to be pooling mana. And the reason why pooling mana is important is because the way that this game is paced is purely by your mana pool. And so mana is dictated by, mana regen rather, is dictated by where you are on your board. If you're at the back column, you get 90% of your mana regen. The third column, which is the third from the back, is going to be, or second from the back, third from the front. I'll just label on the video, is going to be where you get 100% of your regen, and then the second column, second from the front, is going to be 1.1 or 110% of your regen, and then the very frontmost row is going to be 120% of your regen. And so obviously you can tell from that there's a lot of value of being up in front where you can regen mana a little bit faster as opposed to being in the back. And I say all that just because you should be aware of how you can get more and more mana and how you can manipulate your mana pool while you're comboing. But also, just to get back to the actual point, there's no reason to rush the game. You don't get more mana for being low on mana. You do lose mana for being capped out on your mana pool, but if you're capping out on your mana pool and the only alternative is to whiff a spell that you need, then you might as well just keep that mana capped out, right? You can always use your weapons, whether it's Celestes, Hailblade, whether you're playing Shopkeeper, you use a tax return. There are plenty of ways within your character's kit to keep your mana not capped, but you shouldn't feel bad about not having it capped, because if you're going to whiff a spell anyways, why even use that spell, right? And so this again ties back into the combo idea, because you can imagine if you're playing a character who has, like, let's say that your character has a 40 damage combo in your list, but you never utilize that 40 damage combo in your list. What ends up happening is that instead of ending the game in 3 interactions, because you hit that 40 damage combo 3 times, your game could end up ending in like 10 interactions because you only hit your 10 damage combos over and over again. So assuming that you have like a 30% hit rate, or you're aiming poorly because you're just spamming, if you just set up your mana and you pull your mana together and you go for these bigger combos, your game will just be easier. And I'm hoping that the gameplay shows this a bit better, just because you can see that our 2 players, or really Windfall, Garden, and Purpile, they never rush their gameplay unless there's a reason to rush. Like maybe there's 1 hit left, maybe they're trying to empty their hand, maybe they're trying to get pressure and like quote-unquote skip the other player's combo by tapping them and canceling something. You can tell that they're always waiting. They're using their low mana periods to play defensively, and then they're being aggressive when the mana hits higher, because that means they can be aggressive. And so it's kind of a natural flow, if you haven't noticed, where when you're high on mana, you can play aggressively, or you can play like counter comboing. And then when you're low on mana, you want to play defensively, or you can look to combo your opponent or interrupt your opponent with a quick spell like Push Slash if they're trying to go for a melee combo. The third tip, which is going to be a bit more difficult to understand, is going to be knowing your opponent's combos. So the reason why you need to know your opponent's combos, which obviously requires a lot of game time, is simply because if you know your opponent's combos, you know exactly how to defeat them. A lot of people ask like, oh, how do I know when to dodge? How do I know when to shield? How do I know when to hit step? Unfortunately, it's just a gameplay experience thing. You need to know exactly how your opponent's combos interact, because if you know how they interact, you know which button to press. So let's say that you have a Chiretta who's going for Whirl Minigun. I used the example before, but if they go for a Whirl Minigun, you can actually hit step or hold up and down as Whirl ends, and that denies the 6 damage from Minigun because you can walk out of it since it's a gap 1. And if you don't know that, you might just assume that you can't walk out of it. You might take 6 extra damage because you chose to not, walk out. Same thing with stuff like Push Slash Mistletoe. Like Push Slash Mistletoe, you can walk after Push Slash. Like you don't have to take that damage from Mistletoe if you walk. But some players might just feel defeated and think like, oh, like I'm stunned for the entire time that Push Slash, so I'm just gonna stay in the Mistletoe. And so you'll see that are, again, in the background, there'll be times where you see Garden, Purpile, and Windfall utilize their dodge or shield in what seems to be an actual combo, but because they know that there are small gaps in their opponent's spell strings, they can press a defensive button, and that lets them dodge and like deny what could be like 15 more damage, right? And so unfortunately, there is no easy answer for knowing when to dodge or shield. You really genuinely just need to know what your opponent can do. But once you understand all that, your gameplay will be a bit easier. Maybe you can go into the practice tool and lab your opponent's combos out and see what the gap in the top says. Or you could even just, experiment during the game and try and hold shield, hold dodge, hold hit step during certain combos and experiment and see, oh, like maybe I could have used dodge for that huge combo instead of just staying there and tanking it. And so the final tip I have for you guys, this is one that testers love doing. This is applying multiple forms of pressure. This is more of a deck building thing, but the idea of applying multiple forms of pressure is essentially having spells that will interact or hit different hitboxes within your deck, so that your opponent can never just dodge or sit in one direction. So you see that with a Windfall's deck, he had a lot of cone shaped, vertical shaped, horizontal shaped spells. Same thing with Purple, same thing with Garden. All the top player decks will have some sort of variety in how they interact, so that your opponent just can't walk up and down permanently and permanently just avoid everything. So you'll see that issue a lot if your deck is like only entirely straight lines. Your opponent can just walk up and down, and they can easily hit step your first straight line, and then they'll deny everything else. If your deck is all vertical stuff like step slashes, guillotines, and like I don't know, like barricades, your opponent can walk horizontally a lot and hit step a lot of your stuff because again, if you're just using horizontal spells, then it's just a very easy pattern to understand. And the final, spell, like a lot of times with Coretta, she'll have again like spells that will hit very specific areas. And so if you're just spamming your W2 as Coretta, your opponent can read that and just walk up and down. So you have to like utilize your W1 and walk back and punch your opponent for constantly walking vertically when your W1 will punch that verticality movement. So if you're finding a problem with your deck, so like let's say that there's a lot of Hazel decks, for example, that struggle with hitting the third column. If you're having a lot of problems with specific areas of the map and you notice that pattern, then it's always going to be a deck building issue. You can just update your deck to fix that problem. So for example, you have a problem with back row, run backstab, run strip mine, right? You have a problem with third row, strip mine once again, very, very good. Sheer, not the best, but it works. The step spells all access the third column very easily. You have a problem with melee, push slash, kinetic wave, again, strip mine. There's a lot of spells that can help you with dealing with certain areas that you might not really be aware of if you aren't aware that you need to make your pressure different in the game in order to make sure your opponent can't really do a single thing and dodge everything. So hopefully those tips made sense. I'm like a little worried that the video wasn't too good, but I'm hoping it makes sense, especially since I have like really good players in the background. I'm hoping you can see that they're doing what I'm saying, and kind of that visual confirmation makes sense in the end as well. So yeah, that's gonna be it for the video. I hope you guys have a good day or night wherever you are, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.